What makes a country healthy and successful? One of the things I did was use measurements so that you can measure these things. And there's a cycle, and the cycle starts off with the basics. Usually there's an order. An order means a new system that comes into place. 1945, there's a war. The winners of the war get to determine the rules. That war can be an external war, it could be a civil war, but then the new power comes in and there's a new system, new rulers. And the basics start off with good quality civility with each other. Education. Education is a leading indicator of everything. If you put education and civility and working together and not having the conflicts, that period usually after the war is a period of peace and prosperity also, because there's a dominant power. Nobody wants to fight the dominant power. And it's also, wars are great leveling devices. They reduce wealth gaps. They wipe out debts and so on. And so there's a cycle of that kind of improvement. But naturally, as things improve and living standards arise, wealth gaps widen and also debts increase. And it's quite true for countries that have reserve currencies, because they're allowed to borrow from the rest of the world because the rest of the world wants to save in that currency. And so quite often that cycle produces a lot more debt and larger wealth gaps. It also produces great inventiveness, but it also enters a new generation who haven't been through war, who might become maybe a little bit more decadent and not invest in infrastructure and education and the fundamentals that make things healthy. And as a result, you get larger wealth gaps and you get angry and you have more debt. And so a classic set of ingredients is that level of indebtedness and then losing the fundamentals. And of course, what happens is other competitors rise. So other countries after the war, Germany, Japan, they recover, China and other countries recover, and they become viable competitors in that. And so the power of that one dominant power ceases to be as dominant, and then there become more conflicts. So there are fundamentals. The fundamentals are basically, are you earning more than you're spending? Are you well-educated and civil with each other? Are you productive? Are you competitive in the world? And so you can go from country to country right now and almost assess that. Those countries which are earning more than they're spending, that people are civil with each other and there's not internal order, and there's not a risk of an external conflict, are the ones that are best off. The Ukrainian situation is part of a greater story, which is the world being bifurcated and not dominated by a single power. And you can see how it's lining up. You can see which countries, by their actions, are lining up which ways in this conflict. The United States, the NATO countries, as it pertains to the Ukraine, but not as it would pertain to Asia. And you could see China, Russia, and you could see actions by India, and so on, who is acting in what ways. And you will see that lineup be carried through in terms of things like, will there be a G20 meeting? And who will be on what side of the issues pertaining to that. So you're seeing this world polarity begin to line up, and you're seeing questions we'll see. This is like a test war. Many cases, in most cases in war, there's not a good understanding of how the actual war would take place. So it's very interesting when there is an actual war to take place to learn things, such as learning what the military power is and the possibility of escalating that war by Russia if Putin loses that war. Do they go to other escalated forms of conflict, such as nuclear? And also, it's a test of American sanctions. The greatest weapon the United States has, the only really unique weapon anymore, is the power of its economic sanctions. So the world is getting to see, will those sanctions work?